Hello and welcome back to World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm Diana Skaya. The damage to two undersea fiber optic cables in the Baltic Sea has raised alarms across Europe, with some calling it an act of sabotage. Now, a Chinese ship is under investigation, and Finland is urging NATO and the EU to bolster defenses against hybrid threats, and many fingers are pointing at Russia's potential involvement and capabilities. Now, joining me now to discuss this further is Wierenga from the International Relations Institute at the Baltic Defence College. Good morning, Louis. Thank you so much for being with us here this morning on World Talks here on TVP World.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, Louis, why was the Chinese ship cutting telecommunications cable in the Baltic Sea an accident or an act of sabotage?
Well, I mean, right now it's, of course, purely speculation, but I would be inclined to think that that was a deliberate act of sabotage. And the German defense minister said on Tuesday that nobody believes that the cables were cut accidentally. And he also said that we need to, even if we can't specifically say who it came from, although it's looking like we do know who it came from, that it is a hybrid action, and we have to assume that it's an act of sabotage. So for me, the incident was so, pressing and dire that you have to assume the worst. And I think that that's what's taking place right now. And I think that we might see not a diplomatic incident, but a lot of interesting diplomatic conversations based on the knowledge that the Danes and the Swedes and the Germans have put forward about who's responsible for this act.
What can you tell us more about the investigation that Sweden is leading? Of course, Lithuania is also involved, Finland. What can you tell us about this?
Well, the Swedish police, they've also noted, as the Danes have, that a Chinese ship off the coast of Denmark, close to Swedish waters, was the ship that they were looking at. And basically, they have said that it's part of this broader sphere of interest, but that there might be more. And they are increasing surveillance, and they're also increasing information gathering to get to the bottom of this. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has said that China has consistently fulfilled its obligations as a flag state, and they require Chinese vessels to strictly abide by relevant maritime laws and regulations. But the Swedish Navy, not the police, said that there was almost 100% identification of the ships that were in the immediate area of the two cable breaks. So it looks like there's not so much plausible deniability this time as there was a couple of years ago with the new polar bear ship, where other undersea cables were cut. And it looks like, speculation, but it looks like the intent was to shift the blame on the Russians.
Louis, the Lithuanian government is calling for stronger Baltic Sea defenses. What can you tell us about that?
I think that it's imperative that there are stronger Baltic Sea defenses, and I think that we can expect them. A lot of the focus from the Eastern Baltics, so Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, is very much focused on the eastern border with Russia and Belarus. So that's where a lot of the center of gravity is pivoted towards, based on land. But with the maritime, maritime security for NATO got a lot stronger with Sweden and Finland joining the alliance. But there are two important points of access there, one in St. Petersburg and one in Kaliningrad for the Russians. And their navy has not been stretched the way that their land forces have been due to the second phase of their illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. So I would say that right now, currently, this is arguably more of a vulnerability for NATO allies in the Baltic Sea region. And I think that this was probably the final pivotal moment where we can see that this now needs to be a shift in focus amongst maritime security in the Baltic states.
Okay, you're saying that it might be a vulnerability, but let me ask you this. If the investigation confirms deliberate sabotage, what actions is NATO, is the EU going to take in response to deter further incidents of this kind?
Well, my guess would be that it would be a coordinated Nordic-Baltic 8 increase in maritime patrols, increase in maritime reconnaissance to really monitor all of the critical underwater cables to the best of their abilities. But I think that the best that needs to be done, and I'm fairly confident that that will be done. But I think that it's a two-pronged approach. One is just the maritime security, but the other will be how diplomats approach this. With China. I mean, questions need to be asked, hard questions, not just the kind of questions where plausible deniability and diplomatic maneuvering on the part of the PRC takes place, but there really needs to be questions asked. Whether or not those questions will be answered satisfactorily, I don't think so, but I think that the diplomatic pressure that the EU and that NATO allies put on China to really get answers and try to assure that this will stop is going to be the more important of the two-pronged approach. And the third would just be intelligence gathering and intelligence sharing. And I think that one of the, with the next U.S. presidential administration, I mean, the U.S. has a very big role to play, huge monumental role to play in the security of this region. And it's almost certain 99.9%, I'm certain that the Trump administration is going to engage in great power competition with China. So I think that one of the reasons they might be, and again, this is speculation, but one of the reasons that they might be trying to use hybrid tactics is I think that they want to drive a wedge between the U.S. and European allies, and they don't want a further consolidation for other allies going lockstep with steps that the Trump administration will likely take. And I think that they also want to, highlight that we're here. We're not actually not present in the Baltics. We are, in fact, president in the Baltics. North Korean troops are in Ukraine. We're here. So that kind of signals to NATO allies that they're present, but also to the United States that it's not going to be so easy to round up everybody and have a unified approach towards China.
Louis, well, let me ask you this. I mean, you're talking about that. You're mentioning China quite a lot there. Moving forward, looking ahead, how are these kind of incidents going to influence NATO and EU policies regarding hybrid threats and relations with China and Russia?
Well, it's interesting because right now the political approach is more or less to approach them separately, but both of these countries, Russia and China, have this partnership without limits, and it's been put on paper at the NATO summit in the communique that China is an enabler of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. And I think that the big emphasis from them is that they don't want the U.S. and Western allies to be the ones that dictate policy, and they also don't want the world order to be shaped around the values that we share, because that doesn't really benefit them. And I think that it would be a better course of action to approach them together right now. We don't know how long this partnership without limits is going to last, but for the foreseeable future, it probably will, based on a lot of the geopolitical calculations, the current security environment and the upcoming security environment, which can only speculate after the next administration. So I think that one of the talks that I'm certain is going on right now with diplomats and policymakers, and also military as well, is that we maybe should start looking at them as not in silos, but together. And I think this incident really highlights that. If governments come out and unanimously state that, yes, it was this country doing this in this region with these objectives in mind. So that might change the diplomatic and political approach towards China. But again, there is some hesitation because looking at a country as a strategic threat, or at least a strategic rival, but an economic ally, it puts a lot of pressure for many different reasons, whereas Russia does not have that. They've been largely closed off to the West, not exclusively, but largely. And the longer this goes on, and the worse that they do in Ukraine, the more people are going to start to continue to view Russia as a pariah, whereas China has been a little bit more calculating in what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do.
Thank you so much, Louis Wierenga from the International Relations Institute at the Baltic Defence College, for giving us all your insights this morning.
It's my pleasure.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.